Thank you so much, John. And I concur with everything that John shared. Thank you for getting us off to a solid start like that and sharing about the foundation that we have and the importance of staying faithful to the truth. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm glad to see you made it through all the rain, and I think it thundered and lightninged a couple times, and some of you have come a good distance. It's great to be here in Sioux Falls, and this is my first time actually to share here in Sioux Falls, but I've been in the area before a number of years back. We shared over in Yankton, and our whole family was with us then, and then also my wife stems originally, her family, from North Dakota, from the Jamestown area. And so when my book first came out, in Roots of Global Occupation, I remember one of my very first speaking tours was in North Dakota, and I think we were in just about every city up there, from Fargo to Minot and Williston and Bismarck and points in between. And I always enjoy traveling out this way, and especially sneaking over to the Black Hills whenever we have a chance. You have a beautiful, beautiful state, and also a beautiful and apparently rapidly growing city. Since the first time I came through here 20 some odd years ago, Sioux Falls is just really grown. And that also means a lot of opportunities here to share the gospel with people who the Lord is bringing here from all over the place. In the last few weeks, my wife and I have been particularly busy. Since mid-September, we've been in Columbus, Ohio, Appleton, Wisconsin, and then Monterrey, Mexico. And I just want to comment a little bit on Mexico, because we were there for the better part of a week, and it took me the first day and a half to recover from the shock. I don't know if any of you have ever been to Monterrey, but we got there and I thought I was in Atlanta, Georgia. It's this beautiful, big, prospering city. And all the people we met were so incredibly friendly. Came to find out, to make a long story short, in the Monterrey area, approximately 20% of the people there are now evangelical Christians. And they're on fire for the Lord. Of course, not all of them, but many of these people. We met a good number of them. And the conferences that we spoke at, there were 3 of us. Evenings, there were generally between 1,000 and 2,000 people there, and also Sunday morning, the church services. I would estimate that approximately 70% of the people there were under the age of 30. Just passionate for the Lord, and God is really doing some things down there. It's exciting. And like I said, I was just shocked, and we made some really good friends, and I think the Lord is going to bring about some good fruits down the road through all of that as well. Also had the opportunity while there to share at a Bible seminary. There are about 80, something like that, a little bit less than 100 young people there, most of them in their 20s, preparing for ministry. And we had to finally break it off and leave when we got to the Q&A time. I'd have been there for hours. There was so much interest among the young people again down there. So great experience in Mexico, and I walked by the Weather Channel. It was on the TV out there, and the west side of Mexico is getting ready to get hit by a Category 5 hurricane. Patricia, I think they're calling it. And fortunately, it's not in a hugely populated area where it's going to make landfall. But the people down there, be praying for them over the next 24 hours, especially the believers down there. They're going to have their hands full, because this thing's going to probably make it pretty far inland and be quite devastating. While I'm on that topic, while I was down there, really through an act of God, my first book came out in Spanish, and Roots of Global Occupation is now available in Spanish. The organizer of the conference happened to know a printer down there who he said could possibly print my book in Spanish, and he printed the books of a couple of other friends, and so we gave him the go-ahead, and it came out just in time for the conference. So if you would like to try to get the book out in Spanish, that is now a possibility, and just want to make you aware of that. We've got some of them back there. Also just wanted to mention briefly any resources that we have. we personally read and look at. We come under a lot of pressure from people. They want us to carry their products and get them out, but we don't want to just make anything available if we don't know what's in it. And so that means old-fashioned reading and research and not just going out there marketing and promoting anything that comes along. And so we really believe in the books and the CDs that are available, and we hope that you will use them as witnessing tools after looking at them yourselves. So with that said, I would like to spend a moment in prayer, and so if you would bow your heads with me. Father, we thank you for bringing this group of people together on this particular evening, and we don't believe that anything happens by accident, and that everyone is here for a purpose. Lord, we thank you for bringing Audrey and myself here at this point in time, and I just pray that you would give me the words to speak, that it would only be the truth, Lord, nothing embellished, but that your truth would go forward tonight, and that we would leave better informed and closer to you. So I ask now that you open our hearts, and that we would receive, and that we would think clearly and process things effectively, and be able to use this information for your honor and glory. In Jesus' name, amen. Tonight I would like to look at some of the important developments that have taken place over the last couple of months, and also what is being planned between now and the end of the year. It's a very active period of time for people in the One World movement, those in high places who are pushing to create a global system of government and religion, and much deception is part of this. A great deal of deception is part of this agenda, and so we need to be alert and not just buy into anything that comes along. If you have your Bibles, turn with me to Matthew chapter 24. And let's take a look at what Jesus had to say about the conditions that would be prevalent before he returns. I'm going to read, I'd love to read the whole chapter, but I'm going to start in verse 3 and go through verse 14. As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. "Tell us," they said, "when will this happen, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" Jesus answered, "Watch out that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, claiming I am the Christ, and will deceive many. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains." This sounds a lot like what's happening right now, and growing, more frequency, all these things. Verse 9, "Then you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of me. At that time many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other, and many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold, but he who stands firm to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come." Well, based on this, if we're not in the final few years, we're definitely, historically speaking, in the end times, because we are seeing all these things taking shape before our very eyes. Now I want you to go to Revelation chapter 13, and let's see how the Lord describes Satan's final deception of mankind, which takes place immediately prior to the Lord's return. I'm going to read the second half of verse 2 on down through verse 8. And bear in mind, the dragon, whenever the dragon or the serpent is mentioned in Scripture, it's usually a reference to Satan, and symbolic of Satan, all right? It says, "The dragon, or Satan, gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority. One of the heads of the beast seemed to have had a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. And the whole world was astonished and followed the beast. Men worshiped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast, and they also worshiped the beast and asked, "Who is like the beast? Who can make war against him?" The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies and to exercise his authority for 42 months. He opened his mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. He was given power to make war against the saints and to conquer them. And he was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, that is, all whose names have not been written in the book of life, belonging to the Lamb that was slain from the creation of the world. Now, if we were to continue reading on all the way through chapter 14, and you take all this together, these passages describe an end times global political system that will use its economic and military power to enforce religious worship. Ultimately, it's about religion, but politics and economics is going to be used to sway people to get to that point, to deceive people. Now, I would like to briefly examine this evening the activities of two men who are currently doing everything they can to establish such a global system. Their efforts are definitely not of God. Their goals include the creation of a new world order, which I believe, according to Scripture, will deal harshly with Israel and others who oppose Satan's one world agenda. Pope Francis, the 266th Pope and the first Pope to have come directly from the Jesuit order, has been cooperating closely with President Barack Obama on several fronts involving the New World Order. These areas include the following, and these will be the three that I will focus on and elaborate on this evening. They include the creation of a Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital. Secondly, the whole climate change agenda, which is moving us in the direction of global government, and also the homosexual LGBT rights movement. This may or may not come as a shock to you, but I want to walk you through this. This is all very serious, and we're not hearing much about this through the media, which is rather one-sided. Make no mistake, this is a very wicked agenda. Both of these men are deceived, and whether they realize it or not, are helping to usher in the end times New World Order. Area 1, dealing with Israel. The United Nations is moving ever closer to declaring the establishment of an independent Palestinian state, with its capital being Jerusalem. In fact, last month during the 70th session of the UN General Assembly, the Palestinian flag was raised over the UN. Are you aware of that? I'm curious how many of you knew that. There was virtually nothing in the media. Only some of the more conservative Christian media outlets mentioned that. Pope Francis and Barack Obama have stated their positions openly in favor of a Palestinian state which would require Israel to give up most of its strategic lands and return to its pre-1967 borders. If that were to happen in one spot in Israel, it would only be something like 10 miles wide. It would be virtually impossible to defend the country, and these people know that very well. Furthermore, the land that Israel has today around its borders, some of that was taken in 1967, but not because Israel was aggressive in doing so. It came under attack by the surrounding countries. Israel won the war in just a few days, and they held on to certain territories as a type of buffer zone in case they are once again attacked in the future. And so today you have the Golan Heights and parts of the West Bank that are under Israeli control. Gaza was, but they were forced to give that up by the United States, President George Bush being president at that time, and look what's happened ever since. Israel is really feeling the heat from much of the world, but especially right now from the current Pope and from Barack Obama. My lead article in our fall newsletter issue is called Obama and the Pope. And you can read that. By the way, those of you who are on our mailing list, who are subscribers, You should be getting that in the mail. If you didn't today, probably tomorrow. We sent it out on Wednesday, I believe it was. And so you'll be able to read that article. It goes into a lot of detail and documentation on some of the things we're sharing this evening. And also, I'm not sure what radio station Jan Markell's program airs on around here. Do any of you know? Can you speak it openly? What radio station carries Jan's program locally?
BCY.
BCY, you get that here in Sioux Falls? Okay.
106.5 and there's 90, I think 90.5, something like that.
Okay. If you can record that tomorrow, come to the conference by all means. But a program that I just recorded with Jan a few days ago is going to air tomorrow on her program with Olive Tree Ministries on this very subject matter too. We devote a whole hour to it along with Eric Barger. So hopefully you'll, one way or another, you'll be able to listen into that. Or if you have friends who can't be here, tell them about that. For your information, the Vatican has also privately backed Obama's Iran nuclear agreement. It's worth noting that Pope Francis supported Obama's pursuit before, during, and after the agreement was signed, all along the way. In my opinion, the Vatican was as much involved in this as the Obama administration was. Every major Mideast policy currently coming from the Vatican and the Obama administration is detrimental to the future of Israel. Not one thing has fallen in favor of Israel, not one. And at some point you have to ask yourself that, this can't be a coincidence when things consistently stack up one-sided like that. This is part of their agenda. Their actions cause us to ask the question, are Obama and the Pope incredibly naive and stupid, or are they just plain evil? There aren't that many possibilities. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is gravely concerned over the direction of the developments at the UN, the Vatican, and the Obama administration, especially in light of the current ongoing hostilities in the Middle East. And in Israel itself now, the last few weeks. Israel is normally a safe place, but right now things are happening that haven't happened in a long time. Jews are being stabbed and attacked all over the place, and it's a very dire situation. Anyway, toward this end and these developments, Bibi Netanyahu delivered a very poignant speech before the UN General Assembly on October 1st. And I'd like to share a few excerpts from that speech, especially because most of what he said was not carried by the secular media. There are only a few statements, and that's about all they shared. So I want to go into this in some length. Of course, don't have time to share all of his talk, but I've selected a few quotes because I think we need to be aware of this. Again, this was on October 1st. Bibi Netanyahu said, after 3 days of listening to world leaders praise the nuclear deal with Iran, I begin my speech today by saying, ladies and gentlemen, check your enthusiasm at the door. By fueling Iran's aggressions with billions of dollars in sanctions relief, it makes war more likely. And then he goes on and he lists about 10 or 15 things that Iran has done in just the last few years in supplying weapons and encouraging just about every terrorist organization around Israel and equipping them so that they can attack Israel and make their lives difficult. And I'm not going to go through all those because it's too long here, but he's very specific. Then he goes on to say, last week, Major General Salehi, the commander of Iran's army, proclaimed this, quote, we will annihilate Israel for sure, end quote. 70 years after the murder of 6 million Jews, Iran's rulers promised to destroy my country, murder my people, and the response from this body, the response from nearly every one of the governments represented here has been absolutely nothing. Utter silence, deafening silence. Then at that point, Netanyahu paused for about 44 seconds and just stood there in silence. Then he continued, perhaps you can now understand why Israel is not joining you in celebrating this deal. If Iran's rulers were working to destroy your countries, perhaps you'd be less enthusiastic about the deal. If Iran's terror proxies were firing thousands of rockets at your cities, perhaps you'd be more measured in your praise. And I want to pause here for a moment and say, almost weekly, Israel is having rockets fired at them. Nothing in the media. Absolutely nothing. He goes on, and if this deal were unleashing a nuclear arms race in your neighborhood, perhaps you'd be more reluctant to celebrate. In every generation, he says, there were those who rose up to destroy our people. In antiquity, we faced destruction from the ancient empires of Babylon and Rome. In the Middle Ages, we faced inquisition and expulsion. And in modern times, we faced pogroms and the Holocaust. Yet, the Jewish people persevered. And now another regime has arisen, swearing to destroy Israel. That regime would be wise to consider this. I stand here today representing Israel, a country 67 years young, but the nation state of a people nearly 4,000 years old. Yet, the empires of Babylon and Rome are not represented in this Hall of Nations. Neither is the 1,000-year Reich. Those seemingly invincible empires are long gone, but Israel lives. The people of Israel live. So here's my message to the rulers of Iran. Your plan to destroy Israel will fail. Israel will not permit any force on earth to threaten its future. And here's my message to all the countries represented here. Whatever resolutions you may adopt in this building, whatever decisions you may take in your capitals, Israel will do whatever it must to defend our state and to defend our people. And then he closes with the final quote. And the UN, distinguished delegates, should do one more thing. The UN should finally rid itself of the obsessive bashing of Israel. Here's just one absurd example of this obsession. In 4 years of horrific violence in Syria, more than 250,000 people have lost their lives. That's more than 10 times the number of Israelis and Palestinians combined who have lost their lives in a century of conflict between us. Yet last year, this assembly adopted 20 resolutions against Israel and just one resolution about the savage slaughter in Syria. Again, that speaks volumes when you think about it. He goes on, he says, talk about injustice, talk about disproportionality. 20, count them. One against Syria. When will the UN finally check its anti-Israel fanaticism at the door? When will the UN finally stop slandering Israel as a threat to peace and actually start helping Israel advance peace? And the same question should be posed to Palestinian leaders. When will you start working with Israel to advance peace and reconciliation and stop libeling Israel, stop inciting hatred and violence? So it's a powerful speech. This is a small portion of the entire speech, but I felt compelled to reproduce part of that in our newsletter so that our people could read that, because again, they didn't get it through the mass media. Israel has its back against the wall, and we're living in a country whose leader is a big part of that problem, which should make us cringe. Historically, when countries have gone out of their way to go against Israel, and it's part of their policy to do so, they have not been blessed. They have eventually received God's judgment. And so we're walking a very dangerous line right now. I could go on and on about this all night. I won't. I want to go to area 2 now that I mentioned of the 3, where Obama and the Pope are cooperating. And this is in the area of climate change. On September 23rd, as most of you probably already know, Pope Francis arrived at the White House for a special meeting with Barack Obama. This was a closed-door meeting. It was quite lengthy. It's difficult to know exactly what was discussed, but I'm sure they covered everything from the Mideast situation to climate change, a lot of points in between. But the next day, on September 24th, Francis made history by being the first pope to ever address a joint session of the U.S. Congress. And he hit on all these different areas. If you had a chance to watch that speech and what led up to it, I mean, you'd have thought that God arrived. It was unbelievable. And I mean, Boehner was weeping. You probably saw part of that. And I thought, wow, you know, if there's an evangelical Bible-believing leader who was able to take the podium, I don't think people would make that kind of commotion. I know they wouldn't. But again, it just, when you watch something like that, it should send a strong signal into your heart and soul that something is not right, that the world is willing to elevate an individual like that. Then, on the following day, September 25th, Pope Francis launched the UN's new Sustainable Development Campaign, being the keynote speaker before the UN General Assembly. This was, by the way, the official beginning of the UN's final push to ratify the International Climate Change Treaty, and they had the Pope there to launch it. He's completely behind it. World leaders are planning to convene in Paris, France, from November 30th to December 11th, at the invitation of the UN, for the specific purpose of signing this controversial treaty. And what is not known by most is that the shots, politically, are still being called from Paris. UNESCO, which is the most powerful agency of the United Nations, it's really their public relations arm, and they set the tempo for the UN and the agenda. It's still headquartered in Paris. It never moved to New York. So the UN ultimately, the strings are still being pulled from Europe, and people need to understand that. And this Pope in particular is very closely allied with those politically pushing this agenda through the UN. Both the Pope and Obama have gone out of their way to promote and announce their support for the climate agenda and are expected to sign the treaty. This week, Obama began his public campaign. You may have heard 70 companies announced, large companies, Starbucks, IKEA, and others announced their support for the climate treaty, and they're beginning to create a wave of public support to get this thing through. And Obama, like I said, is doing everything he can to promote it. And I expect that beginning very soon in November, you may even begin to see some commercials on television pushing this, done very cleverly. The Pope and Obama have been quite a duo. Both men have been pushing the climate change agreement among the world's political figures, while the Pope has also been actively garnering the support of the world's religious leaders. Toward this end, Francis issued a very potent encyclical addressing the environment and climate change last summer. But another Vatican document, intended to set the stage for the Pope's encyclical, was released just a few months earlier. It was titled Climate Change and the Common Good, and it was produced by the Pontifical Academy of Sciences and the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences. Here are a few of the excerpts from that document that give us a glimpse into the Vatican's and specifically this Pope's strategy. It reads, "Climate change is a global problem whose solution will depend on our stepping beyond national affiliations and coming together for the common good. Religious institutions can and should take the lead in bringing about that change in attitude towards creation. The Catholic Church, working with the leadership of other religions, can now take a decisive role by mobilizing public opinion and public funds. Such a bold and humanitarian action by the world's religions, acting in unison, is certain to catalyze a public debate over how we can integrate societal choices as prioritized under the UN's Sustainable Development Goals." In other words, they're saying here they can do whatever possible to manipulate public funds, public opinion, to get the public on board behind this agenda. In order to create momentum for the support of the climate treaty, a number of interfaith religious gatherings are being planned between now and the UN's meeting in Paris. One such event designed to bring the world's religions together and to serve as a catalyst for environmental action will be held on October 24th. That's tomorrow. It is known as Global Oneness Day, as in Global Unity Day, Global Oneness Day. This massive worldwide celebration intends to usher in a new age of world unity through the realization of oneness, which by their definition means the deity of humanity and the interdependence of the universe. What is particularly disturbing about this undertaking is that many churches around the world will be participating the day after tomorrow, and Sunday oneness services, aligning themselves with this agenda. Christians are rapidly losing their discernment, being overwhelmed by the media's barrage of support for this treaty and their church leaders' endorsement of the same. And you might be asking, we've talked all about this climate change treaty and the environment, but what is really wrong with the climate change treaty? I was hoping you'd ask that question. Here's the answer. Along with the underlying spiritual deception associated with this push, and I just touched on it briefly a moment ago, which is leading people to embrace earth-centered pantheistic beliefs, the treaty itself happens to be the cornerstone for the one world agenda. This is how they hope to usher in the one world government. Few people are aware of the fact that if this treaty is ratified, it will put in place the international legal framework and infrastructure for the United Nations to enforce the treaty at the national, state, and local levels in every country of the world. Through this agreement, we will all be taking a giant step into a system of world government. What's more, this treaty has been cleverly crafted in such a way that it goes way beyond typical environmental matters to cover nearly every facet of our lives. For example, it addresses gender equality, ending hunger and poverty, reducing inequality within and among countries, which means income redistribution, and creating world peace, to mention just a few of its 17 points. In short, it uses every existing problem on our planet as a reason for needing a world government to solve it. Investigative journalist Michael Snyder says it best. He says, for those wishing to expand the scope of global governance, sustainable development is the perfect umbrella because just about all human activity affects the environment in some way. The phrase, for the good of the planet, can be used as an excuse to micromanage virtually every aspect of our lives. This treaty truly is a template for radically expanded global governance, end quote. Don't be deceived. The UN's climate treaty is an international power grab, and unfortunately, a majority of the world's most visible political and religious figures, including Obama and the Pope, are fully on board. You cannot bring about a world government by someone coming to a podium and simply saying, we have to have world government today. People have to have a reason to accept it. And that means things have to appear to be so bad in the world with a crisis on every front. And these crises have to be fanned. And so everything with the environment, in my opinion, is being overblown. And the fact that we as humans can stop it is a huge lie. We can influence 3 to 5%. 3 to 5%. That's it. If people tell you anything beyond that, they're lying. It's not true. So in other words, if the oceans were to rise by 20 feet because of global warming or climate change, if we did everything possible, humanly speaking, perfectly, in dealing with the environment, the water would still rise 19 feet. It wouldn't go all the way up 20 feet, but it might go up 19 feet. And this is the part that we're not being told. We're being told that we can stop this, and that we will be told in the future we need a world government to do so. We have to empower the UN to the point where they can do anything they want to do, and it's in the name of the environment. But that's just one of the ploys they're using. The other one is we have to have world government to bring about world peace and to deal with the world hunger situation and everything else. Every problem in the world is a reason for world government. Back in the 1980s, I was communicating with an organization headquartered in Colorado that is taking the lead in helping to organize a lot of meetings promoting world government. And way back then, they put out a list of 49 reasons for why we need world government. And close to a third of them had to do with the environment. They were talking about global warming back in the 80s before publicly the term was even used. Now, some of the same people that were promoting that agenda in the 80s, only about 10 years earlier, were warning the world about a coming ice age. Seriously. And doing so in the name of science. The climate is changing. It's always in flux. It changes and will continue to change. But to bring about a world government to solve it, that's a huge deception. Okay, the third area I want to touch on has to do with the gay agenda. President Obama and Pope Francis not only are cooperating on the Mideast peace initiatives and on the climate change agenda, they're also on the same page when it comes to homosexual issues. Everyone knows where Obama stands on the LGBT agenda. He went so far as lighting up the White House with rainbow colors after the Supreme Court announced their decision in favor of same-sex marriage. But the real hero on the international stage for gay rights has been Pope Francis. This is unknown to most people. I've got an article here written by Hal Meyer, and it's titled, "Rock Star Says Pope Francis is My Hero." I'm going to quote from this article. Meyer writes, "Elton John has described Pope Francis as his hero during his annual AIDS benefit in New York. John, who is a homosexual, praised Pope Francis for pushing for an acceptance of homosexuality within the Catholic Church." And then he quotes Elton John, who says, "He is a compassionate, loving man who wants everybody to be involved in the love of God. It is formidable what he is trying to do against many, many people in the church." John continues, he says, speaking of the Pope, he says, "He is courageous and he is fearless, and that's what we need in the world today." Then he concluded, "Make this man a saint now." Okay? Francis was also named Person of the Year by the gay rights magazine, The Advocate, in December 2013 and appeared on their cover. In addition, Francis was named Man of the Year in the Italian edition of Vanity Fair. The magazine said, "Francis is a miracle of humility in an era of vanity. His beacon of hope will bring more light to any advancement of science because no drug has the power of love." So all of this is being couched in the name of love. Though the Pope was not known to be a strong supporter previously of the homosexual lifestyle, his remarks since becoming Pope have both surprised and encouraged gay rights advocates and activists. No doubt Elton John's remarks will encourage his fans and others to support the Pope and his plans for the world. And there's much more, too, that I don't have time to go into detail right now, but the Pope has done other things as well supporting this. I've got to mention this one thing yet. You know, when the Kentucky clerk was taking a stand on same-sex marriage, it got out that she briefly met with the Pope. Well, there were like 12 people or so that practically passed through a line that spent virtually no time with him. I mean, it's something very, very brief. But a lot of evangelicals thought for a moment, well, the Pope's on our side, you know, because of that. During the Pope's visit to the United States, he only had one official audience. And it was with a man by last name of Grassi, Grassi. And he was a former student of the Pope's. And according to a CNN interview that I personally saw where they interviewed Grassi, he said he had a conversation with the Pope a number of years ago regarding homosexuality, and because he had a same-sex partner. And he wanted to know the Pope's stand on this, respecting the Pope's opinion. And the Pope at that time said that this is not a religious matter, but it's a civil matter. So he bowed out. I mean, that tells you right there where he stands. This was a number of years ago, but people just weren't publicly aware of it. Fact: 66% of Americans currently have a favorable or very favorable view of Pope Francis. This was according to an ABC World News report on September 3rd, before he ever came to the U.S. And with all the promotion that he got while he was here, if anything, that number would have gone higher. So you've got about 2/3 or more of the American people that are in love with this current Pope. And I'm sure you've noticed how the media has hyped this man. It's almost as if he can do no wrong. He's being promoted as the chief spokesperson for the planet. He really is. Isn't it interesting that he and Obama have suddenly become the world's top two players, at least publicly, when it comes to Mideast initiatives, climate change, and social and cultural changes, also cooperation among the world's religions. So this is something worth watching, because these men have an agenda, they're pushing it very strongly, and they're getting a lot of support from the media. I think we should find it very interesting and be asking ourselves some questions when you have the supposed Christian leader of the world, the Pope, coming to the United States, and a secular media falling all over themselves to give positive coverage without speaking anything negative. Yet, when a Bible-believing Christian who's a leader speaks out on something, they come against him with such a vengeance, you almost sense they'd like to kill him. I'm sure all of you, I mean, you know, I'm not saying anything new here. This should come through loud and clear, but I think this is a signal to the church. We need to be aware of where all this is going and where these people stand. Bible-believing Christians are hated with a vengeance by most of the people in the secular media. There are a few good people out there trying to do their level best to get the message out, and they too come under attack. There are a few other one world events that have just occurred or are currently underway or getting ready to happen that I'd like for you to be aware of. You won't hear much about these, I don't think, in the media. I could be wrong about some of these yet to happen, but I think the media doesn't think that the general public is quite conditioned enough to be able to hear about this. Some of these, I think they will cover, and I do believe this is an intentional conditioning that we're going through over time to warm up to some of these things. But all these developments line up with the Pope Francis, Barack Obama global unification agenda. On October 1st to the 4th, just a couple of weeks ago, there was a symposium on cultural diplomacy and religion in Greece, in Thessaloniki. And that event brought together chief diplomats and leading politicians from around the world, and also many of the top representatives of the different religions of the world, and a lot of academic figures in discussing the role of interfaithism and the unity of faiths as a primary vehicle for securing world peace. So there's a lot of effort being put into this area, trying to unite the world's religions. So you cannot have a world government, if you think about it, if all the world's religions are at each other's throats. There's a place for that to get us to the point of a crisis, which I think they want. But then after that, there has to be a coming together of the world's religions, and they're laying that groundwork to make it possible, ultimately, for a world government to function. Then, October 15th to the 19th, just last week, the Parliament of the World's Religions met in Salt Lake City, Utah. Thousands of interfaithists were there. Most of the top religious leaders of the world were present at that meeting. They've been holding these parliaments of the world's religions every few years for a couple of decades now, and this was the latest one, and probably the biggest. Then from October 15th to the 25th, so this is taking place right now, we're in the middle of the Global Week of Action for a World Parliament. Again, you can see if the media covered this, a lot of conservatives out there would get concerned, and so they're not quite ready to give public attention to this. But this is what it's called, the Global Week of Action for a World Parliament. This is directly tied in with the UN. The Campaign for a UN Parliamentary Assembly is hosting this International Action Week as a time dedicated to advancing the cause of a world parliament, a world government designed around an international parliamentary system. During the last 2 years, the Global Week of Action has spawned World Parliament debates, discussion groups, and model World Parliament sessions in places like Brussels, London, Buenos Aires, Ottawa, Munich, Paris, Tel Aviv, Tokyo, and Washington, D.C. So again, this has been going on for a while, but they're stepping it up further and further each year. And then tomorrow, and I already mentioned, is Global Oneness Day. What I did mention earlier is that some of the speakers at their telesummit will include the likes of Neil Donald Walsh, Barbara Marx Hubbard, Ken Wilber, Gene Houston, Irvin Laszlo, and various other New Age, new spirituality gurus. This is completely a New Age, mystical, occultic event. And these are the kinds of people promoting this. They believe we're one with the earth. We're more important than animals or trees, and that's what a pantheist believes. Which pantheism is, by the way, is the underlying religion of Hinduism, which I don't have time to go into all that right now, but maybe Roger or Warren will. But really, it's this earth-centered religious belief system that is coming on, and that lines up with this push for world government and world unity. One more thing I want to mention, well, the climate change conference, of course, November 30th to December 11th, that will get media coverage, but they'll only tell us what they want us to know about it. But it'd be impossible not to cover that event. It'll be so huge. And then finally, on December 27th through the 29th, the 14th session of the Provisional World Parliament will be held in Calcutta, India. They hold it in different places. This is basically a dress rehearsal type of a practice session for a world parliament. And the organization helping to put this together is called the World Constitution and Parliament Association, the WCPA for short. In their literature, they say, and this is a direct quote from them, from the World Constitution and Parliament Association, they say, today's world situation calls for a world parliament to continually build a body of world law, modeling for the rest of the world the way human problems are properly addressed. It also demands immediate action to establish democratic world government in accordance with the Constitution for the Federation of Earth, which is a prototype world constitution. I've held a copy of it in my hands, and it gives us an idea of where they're going. It talks about a world police force. It talks about how they're going to enforce all this. It goes into great detail on the whole thing. And it just gives us an idea of the direction that these kinds of people want to take us in. Again, where's the media on all this, right? How are we doing on time? I think I'm okay. I think I've got maybe 15 minutes or so. Is that okay? Before moving on and beginning to wrap up, there were a few more things that I wanted to touch on regarding President Barack Obama that are all helping to set the stage for this coming one world government system. He has done more to destabilize the world and to dismantle America in a very short period of time than anyone I have ever known. He really has created kind of an atmosphere of crisis on every front. The Mideast, for example, at least 5 of his top generals told Obama, do not get out of Iraq, at least not as fast as he was proposing to do. Do not do it, it'll be a disaster. He didn't listen to him. He pulled our troops out very quickly. And as a result, ISIS filled the vacuum, and now we have the mess that we do. We have the biggest refugee crisis since World War II. And in the media, we see quite a bit about some of the moderate Muslims who are fleeing. And I'm sure there are some ISIS people embedded in there. They'd be stupid not to take advantage of it. But a lot of these people are running for their lives. But what we're not being told about by the media is all the Christians that have had to flee. Now, Iraq, before the U.S. went in, was home to a lot of Christians. I can't remember the exact number, but I'm almost 100% sure it's well over 1 million. There's a strong Christian minority in Iraq, one of the oldest Christian communities in the world. Well, by the time the war ended, about 2/3 of those Christians fled because the persecution against them was stepped up by Shiite as well as Sunni Muslims coming against them in ways that they hadn't done before. So 2/3 of the Christians were already out of Iraq, but now as a result of what ISIS is doing, at least another 200,000 have fled. And some of them have had to leave so quickly they couldn't even grab their passports. They couldn't go back to their homes. They were running for their lives, and some of their relatives being beheaded behind them. And so you have just a small number of Christians left in Iraq. Most of them are now gone. And again, had Obama handled the situation properly, this would not have happened. I will say I personally would not have gone into Iraq. However, to give President Bush credit where credit is due, he stuck with it. And when he left, things were stabilized. They were beginning to return to normal. Electricity was coming on, kids were going back to school. Things were a lot better. But then, as a result of Obama's actions, you know, we have a huge mess on our hands now, and we're really on the doorstep of what could be a major regional war in the Middle East, or possibly even a world war. Secondly, an area where Obama's been active in, the Iran nuclear agreement. After all the negotiations, the Iranians, for all practical purposes, are able to call the shots when it comes to the inspections. It's like a self-inspection process. But the worst part of it is that the U.S., that Obama agreed before this agreement was signed a clause was written in that the United States would obligate itself to come to the aid of Iran if Iran is attacked. Well, who's going to attack Iran other than maybe Israel because they feel they have to knock out their nuclear program before they can use a nuclear bomb to attack Israel? Congress didn't know about this until after it was signed, and only then they found out about it. So there are members of Congress, conservatives, that are livid about this. The media has given very little attention to it. But again, you don't sign an agreement without knowing what's in it, an agreement of this magnitude. Obama knows full well what he signed. And so to me, this is an intentional policy shift that goes against Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu knows this very well. So, he tries to be diplomatic. He'll say some kind things here and there about Obama, but at the same time, behind the scenes, things are extremely tense. Because he and Israel's top leaders understand that they cannot count on the U.S. being at their side. Regarding the economy, the amount of debt has doubled in the last few years under Obama. We're now close to 19 trillion. Some of the world's top economists have said the tipping point is between 22 and 24 trillion. If we get to that point, there's absolutely no way of return. It would be impossible. Right now, under the right leadership, someone who really knows what they're doing, they might be able to put the brakes on, reverse it some, and buy us some time. But we're almost to the edge of the cliff. Within a few years, we'll be there. If anything drastic were to happen right now, major global crisis, or if oil prices were to double or triple suddenly because of a war in the Middle East, whatever, it would put us over the edge pretty quickly. On the morality front, we already talked about the same-sex marriage agenda. I mean, what president would light up the White House in rainbow colors and consider something that important, but yet so many other things that need to be addressed and aren't being dealt with go by the wayside? And finally, the racial tensions. Ben Carson, in an interview, he said, and I tried to write this down word for word, it'll be close if it's not a direct quote. Ben Carson said that Obama should be de-emphasizing tensions rather than highlighting them. And very well said, that's true. But instead, the timing on some of his public statements, it hasn't put a damper on the situation, it has made it worse. And I think we're going to see more and more of this over the next couple of years. I'd like to touch briefly on how potentially events could unfold over the next few years. And this is not a thus saith the Lord kind of thing. It's just I'm only touching on this because afterwards, at least 10 of you will come up and ask me this question. I get asked this all the time, so I just want to say it all at once. This is one way that I see things could come about. I do believe we are headed toward some kind of major crisis in this country. Whether it's another large-scale attack that would make 9/11 look small or something else, I think there's going to be a major crisis. And when that happens, there's going to be a lot of unrest, especially if people can't get food or water, or if there's an EMP attack, for example, and things just shut down. It wouldn't take long before lawlessness would spread. And I believe that our government, depending who's in place at that time, would seize that as an opportunity to enact draconian measures against the American people, but that would work especially against conservative Jews and Christians. And that's when real persecution would start. Right now, some of us maybe experience a little bit of backlash, but we still haven't experienced true persecution in this country. We don't know what it is compared to what our brothers and sisters in the Middle East are going through right now. But I believe that time is coming. And at that point, it won't be pretty, and I think many people will even try to get out of the U.S. In fact, I'll make a controversial statement among a conservative group. I've got mixed feelings about building a wall on the Mexican border because walls can keep people from getting in, but they can also keep people from getting out. It works both ways. The time is coming where I think Americans, some at least, are going to try to leave because they're under the gun to that point. I hope it doesn't happen anytime soon, but when you look at how quickly things are going, I can't say that it won't. And this could happen within the next few years. It could. And I think the timing, to a large extent, depends on the level of repentance that takes place in this country. If the people in this country truly repented, God is more than able to hold things back and give us some more time. But if not, I think we're going to continue to see a progression of these events, and they're going to unfold quite rapidly, I fear. So to wrap up, I would like to address the question, how do we prepare for the difficult times that may be ahead? And I'd first like to hit on actual physical preparations that we can make, and then I want to touch on spiritual preparations. If at all possible, to the extent that it depends on you, get out of debt as quickly as possible. I realize some of you are young, you have young families, we've got kids who are there, you've got mortgages on homes, maybe you can't pay off your home mortgage quickly, but maybe everything else. Really work on it. Now's not a time to be going out making huge purchases and ringing up huge credit card bills. Get out of debt, because when difficult times come, those people who are out of debt will fare much better. You will be a slave to the lender. They will find you whatever money you owe them, and they're going to come after it. Secondly, plan ahead to secure some basic essentials for your family and those the Lord will bring across your path to help. Don't take a selfish approach. If a crisis happens, the opportunity will be there to help a lot of people maybe who were not as prepared as you. And it will be an opportunity for you to witness to them as well. Usually people don't bite the hand that feeds them. There may be people who come in and try to take what you have. There will be that element, but I believe the Lord's going to give us opportunities to really help some people too. And so, think through it, in a common sense way. As far as a water source goes, and maybe having a good portable water purification system and some food. I'm not saying go overboard and stock up on years and years of food and make that your main emphasis. You can get sidetracked doing this too, but the Lord does want His people to be prepared. And also, I've recommended silver coins for bartering purposes. Silver is not necessarily a great investment because you know how prices can fluctuate, but it's a great bartering tool, and in times past, in difficult times, silver coins oftentimes is what people use to barter. Thirdly, secure a reliable mode of transportation. If you don't have a good horse, get a good bicycle. People don't think about that, but again, I know for a fact in pretty high circles what's being discussed right now and what some of our good military people are concerned about is an EMP strike against the U.S. or a situation where our electrical grid can go down. And even the secular media has touched on the fact that both China and Russia could probably take out our electrical grid if they wanted to. And so life would change very quickly, and you're not going to be able to go very far if everything were to shut down. Back in Indiana, I have a friend, he's a heating and cooling guy, a Christian. I love the guy, but he said, well, if things get difficult, I'm going to go to an uncle in Montana. And I thought, no, you won't. He's 1,500 miles away. How are you going to get there? Gas pumps won't even work because the electrical grid would be shut down. You've got to be thinking in terms of maybe 15 to 20 miles from where you're at most, a place that you can either walk to or ride to on a bicycle within a couple of hours. And I know this sounds really survivalist, but you do need to think about this some. And I'm not sharing anything with you that we haven't already thought through as a family ourselves. I would say also, fourthly, become part of a small group where you have people with a variety of skills. If you're in a group of, say, 30 or 40 people, and they're all electricians, good luck. I like electricians, but if they're all electricians and that's it, you want to have people that can do various things. And you can rely on each other then during difficult times. And especially someone who knows how to can food and has a green thumb. And I think the perfect number is maybe 30 to 50 people or something like that, but not huge groups. And it'll be different for everyone. But these groups, by the way, I've had the honor and privilege of meeting with some of these people around the country. They're springing up all around the country. So don't think you're crazy for thinking this way. Thousands of people are doing this, and most of them are very level-headed, normal people. You have a few extremists there where this has become their whole life and they don't think about anything else, and that's not God's will either. But most of these people are level-headed, solid people who are taking these measures. And finally, determine a common place where you'd all gather and meet each other if a major crisis were to occur, because you might not be able to communicate with each other at that time. So that's my advice to you on the physical preparations. And we do have, did we bring the DVD, Preparing for Turbulent Time? Okay, we did, and it goes into some detail along these lines in there as well. And finally, and this is really the most important thing and what I wanted to build up to and close with, and it has to do with spiritual preparedness. We need to get ready spiritually and stay ready. No more ups and downs. I know that's the tendency. It's human nature to go up and down. We need to get ready and stay ready and live at a high level before the Lord. We need to abide in Him and be in a tight relationship, walking closely with the Lord. This requires daily repentance, a humble and contrite spirit, and a steady prayer life. If you have those three things, if you're regularly talking with the Lord throughout the day, not just a little curt 2-minute prayer in the beginning of the day and then that's it, but really walking with the Lord. This is a new concept to some people. You know, they pray the sinner's prayer and accept Christ, and then now they're saved and that's it. We're meant to walk in tight fellowship with the Lord. He needs to be our best friend. We need to talk to Him daily and allow Him to speak to us through His Word. Just a couple of passages of Scripture that I like. Psalm 51:17 says, "The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart. O God, you will not despise." And when it comes to prayer, Philippians 4:6 and 7, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." And we're going to need that peace of mind in the days ahead. That comes from walking with the Lord and communicating with Him regularly. Secondly, God wants to have every part of us, not just a small part of us or an area here. He wants all of us. We need to surrender every area of our lives to Jesus in order to be pleasing to Him and to be effective for Him in these last days. So I ask you, do you have any hobbies that take precedence over the Lord, that keep you from being as close to Him as you need to be? It could be something as silly as video games. Now, there are people killing 4 hours a day playing video games, and some of them are in their 30s. It's an utter waste of time. You need to let go of hobbies that take precedence above the Lord, where you're spending more time in those hobbies than you are with the Lord. The same can be said of any pet sins or obsessions that you may have, or even certain jobs that dishonor Christ. Some people need to leave the jobs that they're on just because of what they have to do on those jobs. Now, I do believe it's important for us to be in the world but not of the world, and be witnesses to the world. But there are certain jobs, in my opinion, that you cannot hold and be a true Christian believer. So we all need to assess that within ourselves. In short, God wants our complete obedience. He tells us to live as children of light in Ephesians 5 and to have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness. And that doesn't mean we look down on people in the world. We need to show them God's love, but we need to live up to what we're professing, or else the world sees our hypocrisy and they want to go the other way and not have anything to do with the Lord. And finally, let there be no more lukewarmness. Be passionate about your relationship and love the Lord wholeheartedly. God hates lukewarmness. Listen to what He said in Revelation chapter 3 regarding the church in Laodicea. Now, these were believers. These were Christian believers He's speaking to here, all right? He said, "I know your deeds, that you are neither cold nor hot. I wish you were either one or the other. So, because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, I am about to spit you out of my mouth." It goes on, "So be earnest and repent. Here I am, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will go in and eat with him, and he with me. And to him who overcomes, I will give the right to sit with me on my throne, just as I overcame and sat down with my Father on His throne. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches." If ever there was a message for today, I think that message is as valid or more valid today than it was back then. So love the Lord with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. If you do that, all the others will fall in place. And remember one passage, it's that one from Luke 10:27, to love the Lord with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Amen?
Amen.
We're out of time. I went a little bit over. But I believe we're going to take just a short break, is that correct? For about 10 minutes or so. And then we'll come back with Roger, who will be next. Thank you.